Everybody, International Master Danny Wrench here, continuing our series on the type of tactics you need to know. The 5 fork themes, fork patterns that we have organized for you are knight forks, pretty obviously, pawn forks, double attacks, which are classified as forks but by pieces other than the knight and the pawn, so double attack forks. Then we have something I like to call tempo forks, the recognition of a tempo square you can move to either execute a fork after that, or one that immediately forks something. And then finally, loose squares and pieces forks, recognition of weak squares and loose pieces, and how you might apply a double attack to 2 at once, or to use them on your way to an attack. So again, you can see the 5 types of fork themes we'll be learning in this series here. Knight forks, pawn forks, double attack, tempo forks, and loose pieces and squares forks. Let's move on to the first position. Of course, the most common type of knight fork you would be aware of is a fork where a knight attacks either a king and a queen or a queen and a rook. These are the royal forks, the family forks, because we are forking the most powerful pieces on the board. This one, of course, comes from the fried liver opening with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and after bishop c4, knight f6, we have the 2 knights with knight to g5. d5 would be the more traditional fried liver, but in this game, we're playing bishop to c5 just to highlight exactly what a fork is, as we did in the first video where we showed a very, very basic version of a fork. You can use your imagination to put the king on d6 or g5 or anywhere else where you might just imagine what it looks like when a knight is having one of those rare opportunities to fork all 3 of the most valuable pieces at once. The fried liver is most easily stopped, for those of you wondering, by challenging the center with d5, which closes the diagonal, after which black can play both knight a5 and knight to d4 as interesting and dynamic moves. Our first position, masters, you have 15 seconds. Experts, you have less than a minute. 1600 to 2000, you should have about a minute, only need about a minute. 1200 to 1600 shouldn't need more than a few minutes, maybe let's say 3 minutes for the clock. And below that, you can have 5 minutes. This is a recognition of an opportunity to create a fork. We're continuing along the theme of a knight fork. Assuming you have paused the video and we are ready to know the answer, here we go. Black plays the move rook takes e5, of course, removing the knight. You would love to just play this fork right away, but you'll be captured by the only piece capable of competing with a knight's forking ability, another knight. So we remove that knight, and at the same time apply an attraction tactic, if you will, that brings the rook onto the forkable square. Knight to f3 check, followed by winning material. About as simple as it gets, but also just important that that kind of theme is never ever missing your gaze, missing your calculations. Never something you want to miss. In this game, actually, the white knight was just on c4 and there was a black pawn on e5. And white played the blunder of knight takes, seeing, well, rook takes is a bad idea because of the knight fork, but forgetting that taking with the knight might not also be a great idea because of the tactic that we just executed. Next position. Our next position, you masters have 30 seconds. You experts have 1 minute. 1600 to 2000, you have 3 minutes. 1200 to 1600, you have 5 minutes. Below 1200, you have 10 minutes. Ready, set, and go. Okay, so here we have a position where there's an obvious opportunity for a fork. That is on e7. Major problem with that? Taking e7 immediately just allows rook takes e7, and it's nothing but a bowl full of jelly. One of the most important things when it comes to forking with knights is, because they're tricky, there's often opportunities to create avenues for the knight to play a devastating fork. I'm not just going to set up very easy positions where the knight is obviously forking the king and queen or king and rook in one move. We already demonstrated exactly what the fork is. So what are the practical ways that we can look to execute them? Well, here it's combining removal of the defender with a fork. We see that the only defender of the bishop on e7 is the rook. And whenever the king and queen are involved, again, one of the psychological themes we'll be learning, you have to be willing to consider everything. So here white's winning move is the move queen to a8, which is, if you want to call it that, it's actually already a double attack with the queen double attacking the rook and the knight. But it's hard to say double attack when you're putting a queen on a square that is sacrificing it for another tactic. But it comes with a very simple recognition that rook takes a8 will allow us to win the bishop on e7 with check, followed by knight takes c8. That is Forktown. The only other way to avoid it might be to move the rook, but the problem is, because of the double attack we already highlighted, you're going to lose material no matter what if you're black in this position. So, recognition of your opportunity to fork allows you to consider moves you might normally dismiss. Don't overlook your chances for a fork, and you will see opportunities just like that. The last example of a knight fork that I chose was, again, along my themes of trying to find positions that are a little more original or at least show multiple different versions of the same bullet point. So it's not just one position that shows a knight fork. We all know what that is now. So we've seen removing a defender so that the knight itself could deliver the devastating blow, as we just did. And we've seen the simple basic examples of a knight forking pieces that are on bad squares. Here we're going to see the power of using a fork to remove a defender from something more important. And if you need to pause your video and solve it, let me give the countdown. We have masters getting 30 seconds. We have experts getting 1 minute. 1,600 to 2,000 players, you get 2 minutes. 1,200 to 1,600, you get 4 minutes. Below 1,200, you have 6 minutes plus. Pause your videos. Okay, and assuming you've done so, here we go. We recognize that white has a lot of powerfully placed pieces. The only irritating thing is that this knight is currently under attack. Taking on e7 would allow the queens to trade and black to win a piece. No bueno, right? Well, the problem is there aren't really many other accurate squares to go to, certainly not that maintain the advantage. Moving the knight to a simple square might even allow black to just trade queens and then pick up this backward pawn on c3. So we have to find the right opportunity. The first thing you think when you see this position, some of the stronger players might have thought of it, is wait, what if we can take here and then give check? We've removed the rook from guarding this fork so that we can execute a nice tactic and then take on b7. The problem at the end of that, all that smoke and mirrors, is that it's nothing but nothing. You end up losing material. It was just a fancy way to go down a pony. So if you can reverse the script but execute an attack on the same weaknesses, this is something that I want to just say real quick that a lot of lower players make the mistake of when they start to become more familiar with the tactical patterns. If they consider one way to skin the proverbial cat and it doesn't work, they often dismiss it and look for something else in the position or assume they need to retreat. But if you've done the work of watching my Patterns Everyone Must Know series and just doing tactics on your own time, a tactics trainer, and training yourself, if you have a good coach, most likely if you smell blood and you see the potential for a tactical opportunity, there is a tactical opportunity. And so dismissing the idea because the first way to approach the position was wrong will lead to many cases where then you go over your games with the computer afterwards and you're like, what the heck, Ribka, what do you mean I was winning? And you see it and you say, oh man, I thought I saw that idea, but I thought it didn't work. And you realize it's because I considered this move order. I didn't consider that move order. So one of the pieces of advice I'm going to give you is if you smell blood, if you recognize the potential for weaknesses in an area, don't give up so easily. Consider more than one way to approach it. And here the winning move is knight to d8 check first. We check on d8, obviously just winning the queen. We haven't given up our queen yet. So he has to take it. And now queen takes e7 is just a bunch of lights out. Queen takes d8, king moves, and, well, if we're not checking on e7 and mating him quickly with the queen, we're probably winning a ton of material. So good enough. Next position. When discussing our second fork bullet point, our second fork theme, pretty much no better place to start than the opening and the common center pawn forks, as we call them, that occur out of multiple different openings. Very often you can look for opportunities to fork minor pieces in the center. What's the advantage of this? Well, even if it's an even trade, very often a center fork opens up lines for your pieces and so leaves you with more space and more activity. In other cases, it actually takes away some of your opponent's best pieces. So in this position, the most active move and the most accurate move after bishop to c5 is knight takes e5, the center fork trick. Knight takes e5 and d4. Just like that, white is going to be winning back the material. Black can choose to give it back in multiple ways. But you're leaving white with a great middle game, the bishop pair, open lines, and easy development for the pieces. And at a high level, this position is probably very, very dangerous to just being losing for black. Another way that the same type of tactic can occur, in this case we'll say for black, would be if white chose bishop to c4, and after knight f6 played knight to c3. Now black has the same opportunity in a Gioco Piano 4 knights, whatever you want to call it, to take and play d5. You might get worried and think that in some cases taking looks like it allows this tactic on f7, especially if you're one of the maybe lower rated viewers, and that's okay. You should be a little worried and always be aware of Zwischenzugs that can be played that might take away your right to castle. But the main point I would add is that in this situation, black is still left with two great center pawns and the bishop pair to justify the center four trick. And a simple developing move like bishop e7 that stops the knights from checking leaves black with a much better potential middle game. Black can play rook f8 and get castled by hand, immediately strike in the center with d5, and you're looking at a position where black has a dominant center, the bishop pair to accompany that, right? They complement each other well, and an open f-file. So what's funny is, at first, the thing that you become afraid of in terms of doing the center fork trick, which is this tactic on f7, eventually becomes the thing you actually look forward to, because I would argue that the bishop pair and the two pawns is a better advantage for black than actually getting the bishop pair and only having one pawn in the center. So, interesting to think of. The last quick center fork trick that I want to show happens in a Pierce often, and can happen in some King's Indian positions where this bishop is awkwardly developed to c4. One of the things that white has to be aware of is the classical threat of the center fork. You could argue that retreating the bishop, or in some cases this bishop on c4 is kind of awkward anyway. Maybe the bishop should just be on e2. But in this case, if white castles, black can immediately take on e4, and once again, knight takes is met by d5, the very classic pawn center fork trick. And taking f7 would allow us to take back, have the bishop pair, and again, the open f-file. Certainly it'd be ambitious to claim that black is just winning in that position, but a good middle game black will have to bring Yoda speak into the conversation. Let's move on to another example of a pawn fork. Here we have black to play, and masters really don't even need to pause the clock, shouldn't be too hard. Whereas experts, probably about the same, 1600 to 2000, you can take a minute. Others, you can take 2 or 3 minutes, whatever you need. The main point is that we have this very dominant, very strong advanced pawn, and the best way to do that is to execute a fork. Well, playing it right away is probably a bad idea because white can just take it. So we remove the bishop on e1 first, seeing the opportunity for the fork, and on both king takes, d2 check, or rook takes, d2 fork, black is going to recover his material and be up a full piece in the endgame. So again, this is sort of rare to see a position with a pawn this advanced, but it does happen. And seeing a chance to fork your opponent's pieces with the pawn, and just illustrating exactly what a pawn fork is what we're trying to do here. Now we are going to move on to the third type of fork, that of course being double attacks. White to play. Masters have 30 seconds. Experts have a minute. 1600 to 2000 have 2 minutes. Below that, 1200 to 1600, you have 3 minutes. And below that, you have 5 minutes. Continuing along the theme of what we're doing here, double attack, pause your video. And assuming you've done so, here we go. Queen to e4. These should be kind of easy to see as we go because you're looking at a situation where you know the theme. It's announced on the title of the video, right? It shouldn't be too hard. And here we are applying a double attack. Knight and a square. Why do we call it a double attack when the queen or the rook and the bishop attack 2 pieces at once, whereas we call it a fork with the knight and the pawn? I actually have no explanation to that. I don't think anybody does, but let's just go with it. So this is a double attack, and here we see the queen attacking not just 2 pieces, but the threat of checkmate along with an undefended piece. The only way to defend it momentarily would be a move with knight f6, but after bishop takes f6, we remove the knight, and with it we have a completely winning position. Masters, you have 30 seconds. Experts, a minute. 1600 to 2000, 2 minutes. 1200 to 1600, 3 minutes. Below that, 5+. Go ahead and pause your videos. I know you have done that. And so here we go. White is up the exchange, but black, of course, has a pawn for it. So without some sort of immediate tactic to potentially expose some of the awkwardness of the pieces here, white could very well not win this endgame. But the most concrete and easy way to do that is bishop takes b7, and after knight takes b7, we see where the rook applies a double attack with rook to d7, attacking both the knight and the bishop. No way for the knight to defend it, as he will be lost. Same with the bishop. We're not going to do any more simple versions of a double attack because we could go on forever. Queen, rooks, and bishops can all apply double attacks in their own way, and we don't refer to them as forks, we refer to them as double attack. Very often it has to do with similar themes. You're looking for the awkwardness of your opponent's pieces and considering the most concrete ways to expose them. Our next theme, we have masters getting 30 seconds, we have experts getting a minute, 1600 to 2000 you have 2 minutes, 1200 to 1600 you have 5 minutes, and below 1200 you have 10 plus minutes. Pause your videos, and here we go. The theme of tempo forks, and what exactly do I think of when I made up this term tempo fork? It has to do with recognizing the opportunity for a fork or double attack, but it's currently not possible because there's a certain piece in the way or because one of your opponent's pieces is preventing it. And so what I noticed a very common theme was that we have to find a way to move one of our pieces with a tempo, with a strong threat, often a check or an attack of a very powerful piece, and that allows us to execute the tactic that we're looking for. So in this case, that is exactly what we are looking to do. We need to look to create a fork with this knight. You've already paused the video and many of you already see it. But in order to do that, we have to find a way to remove the queen with tempo. Well, the best way to do that, we have two options. Both queen takes d6 and queen takes c8. Did you figure out which one was the best way? Okay, the best line is queen takes c8 with check. We remove the queen with a tempo. We win a little bit of material after the rook takes back, because checking on e6 followed by winning the queen on g7 leaves us up a piece. So we go from being down the exchanged up a piece. Why is it the queen takes d6 doesn't quite deliver the same goods that we want? Well, it's because of a simple but a very obvious move for black. King to e8. Blocking on e7 with either piece allows knight e6 check followed by infiltration. But king to e8 makes you instantly regret your decision to take on d6 rather than c8. Best case scenario is probably giving a check again, but already it's very complicated. Black can consider blocking, even the move king to d8, and there's really no concrete follow-up. So be very careful how you choose to open up the square for your piece, and always consider your opponent's defensive resources, as awkward as their position may seem. So if you decided that queen takes d6 was just as winning, well, you were wrong. And again, theme of tempo forks. It's about recognizing the opportunity, which comes with awareness of your opponent's weaknesses and your excelling pieces, the powerfully placed pieces, so that you can see, hey, I would really love to get that. And you look for a way to create it with a tempo, with a powerful threat, a forcing move. That's exactly what a tempo move is. Let's see one more example of this. The second theme of a tempo fork, to me, I wanted to use a position that showed using a tempo square or creating a tempo threat in order to reach our goal. So it's still a double attack, but unlike the other double attacks we've seen, here we are exposing a weakness while gaining a tempo in order to get there. So if you want to pause your videos, masters, you get 30 seconds. Experts, you get 1 minute. 1600 to 2000, you have 2 minutes. 1200 to 1600, you have 5 minutes. Below 1200, you have 10 minutes. I really hope that everyone is pausing the video now and encouraging everyone to participate. Big part of the teaching I try to apply to these videos is delivering the material, presenting in a way that, if you cooperate, will be the most beneficial for your chess. If you're just going to zone out and then say, hey, why isn't my diamond membership guaranteeing me 500 points better? Well, that's clearly a you problem. So, black to play here. What exactly is the move? Queen e5, boomtown, exclamaviyaj, hitting a1, and wait, Danny, what are you talking about? Why is that so powerful? I can guard with the queen or move my rook? Well, no matter what you do, we are using e5 as a tempo square to reach our real goal, which is h2. The awkward weakness is that you recognized this king is not ideally placed, not on g1, guarding what is normally the most important squares. So here black uses this threat of taking on a1 as a tempo move. It's a double attack. We're gaining a tempo. The queen or the rook, either queen to b2 or we move the rook. Neither one of them really does the trick in terms of stopping black's threats. And black is completely winning, launching an attack that will likely lead to mate. So that's the other version in my mind of a tempo fork. First one being that you recognize the chance for a double attack, and so you remove the piece in order to use that square with a tempo. Here we are using a square to gain a tempo on a piece so that we might access the other square that we're attacking. Really, it's a fork between the rook and the h2 square. All right, our fifth and final theme has to do with something that is sort of similar to the last one, which is the recognition of a vulnerable square or piece. And here, before I tell you the answer or elaborate more on the theme, I'll let you pause the video. Masters, you get 30 seconds. Experts, you get a minute. 1600 to 2000, you have 3 minutes. 1200 to 1600, you have 5 minutes. Below 1200, you have, let's just say 10 minutes. Okay, assuming you pause the videos, and it is time to move forward, here we go. The point of the final theme, which is the recognition of vulnerable pieces and vulnerable squares, is sort of a combination of everything. Really, it's all about recognizing where a potential fork might be and what the important pieces are that are defending that square currently, and what the loose pieces are in the position so that you don't miss a chance to potentially get a tactic against a vulnerable or hanging piece. So it's just a final reiteration that the fifth theme of just knowing how to get a fork is to recognize where the loose and vulnerable pieces are at all times. And in this case, black sees an opportunity and delivers the goods with queen takes f3 and knight to e2 check, winning the queen on d4, which will leave black up a piece, and we have one more puzzle. Just like in our first pin video, the last puzzle is designed to be slightly more tricky. Masters, you have, we'll call it 1 to 2 minutes. Experts, you have 2 to 3 minutes. 1600 to 2000, you have 3 to 4 minutes. And we'll say 1200 to 1600, you have 5+ minutes. Below 1200, you can take as much time as you want. Again, you're my favorite. So it's not always easy to seize the opportunity for a fork when you're not aware of what the vulnerable or weak pieces are. Assuming you've now paused your video and that we are about to get going. If not, you can do it now. Here, the point is, whenever the king is involved and you have a lot of pieces that are looking for avenues to get in a number of areas, don't ever give up on considering the multiple different move orders that you can consider. If one doesn't work, the fact that you smelt blood to begin with probably means you were right. Where it really becomes hard is the psychological effort to let go of thinking that you're right, and when you realize sometimes there really is no tactic, but that's a whole other story. In this case, we see that there's a lot of awkwardness, and if we could, we would love to execute a tactic that wins some material, especially when we consider that probably one of black's main weaknesses is the lack of development. So, how do we do it? If you pause your video and try to solve it, you are ready for me to reveal the answer. The move is rook takes h4 first, of course. Exclam. Simply picking up a knight, and if you do nothing, I will be happily up a pony and continue my attack. If you take, the execution continues with queen takes f8, and after king takes f8, knight to g6 check. We see the final climax is indeed a fork, and that looks so pretty. What would happen if we played knight to g6 first? Well, unfortunately, you would just be turning the whole tactic into a big, fancy trade. And at the end of it, you would have won nothing. So, if you considered rook takes h4, but then knight to g6 first, you do not get credit. That's right, you get it wrong. I'm being tough on you today. If you consider queen takes f8 first, then you really don't get credit, because after queen takes f8 and then rook takes h4, you forgot one thing. I don't have to take your rook on h4, allowing you to fork me. A simple developing move, and you might say, oh wait, what happened to the queen, love? Yeah, right. So, that would be bad. Recognize the tactical opportunities that might exist because your opponent's vulnerable or misplaced pieces, but don't get careless. And you have to be accurate. Very often the most forcing road is the right road to Rome, not roads that leave options for your opponent. The only one that really left an option was rook takes h4, but hey, we're picking up a free piece, and in that case, if he doesn't want the option of taking it, we might be just as happy. So, in quick review, we'll leave this final position up as we bring up the 5 bullet points here of what are the types of forks we learned. Knight forks, of course. Pawn forks. We talked about double attack, the traditional attacking 2 things at once with the queen or rook or bishop. Tempo forks, this sort of art of using a threat, gaining a tempo so that then you can deliver a fork, especially when it's not possible for that. or in some cases using a tempo square to actually be giving a double attack that might improve your position, as we saw with the queen coming to e5. And then finally, just a recognition of loose and vulnerable pieces, and that's really what tactics are all about. I know that some people might say, well, isn't it all kind of the same theme? You're right. I mean, we're talking about a fork, and a fork essentially is a double attack, attacking two pieces at once. So every single theme we look at is going to have ties to the other, in the sense that why do we even call a knight a fork and a queen a double attack? I don't know. It's really the same type of pattern. The ultimate goal is that we're either winning material or improving our position significantly by a double attack, as we've seen in all of them. What we're trying to do here is just give you guys some themes to sort of understand that if it's not obvious to you where a fork is or what the best opportunity is for a double attack, maybe this video and seeing how it was sort of broken down, that we can look to gain a tempo. Maybe we just, okay, I don't see an opportunity for a tactic. Have I considered all the ways to take advantage of the loose or vulnerable pieces? These are the thought processes you would have in your approach, and hopefully you'll remember what the different things are that you can look for when executing a fork and a pin, and as well as a lot of the other videos to come. And I love you all very, very much, and go ahead and go get to work. See you around on chess.com, everybody.